What's going on, everybody? I'm Informal Geek, and today we're going to take a deep dive into the settings that are offered in Quidditch Champions. And I'm also going to give you some recommendations for some settings and then also some key bindings. And we're going to highlight a few of those things in game as well. So let's just get started. So I've already reset all of these settings to default except for audio, only because of YouTube. I didn't want to have any problems with the music being played here, so I turned it off. So we'll start here actually in the volume. So what I like to do is I like to leave voice chat on, but after I enable push to talk. This is going to require a key binding change because by default, at least on PS5, and I'm assuming for Xbox as well, there is no button set and assigned for push to talk, even if I turn this on. But we are going to turn it on right now. And as far as other settings for immersion sakes, I like to bump the crowd all the way and leave everything else here. And then I turn the announcer down to about 15. Sometimes I'll bump it to 20, but 15 is quiet enough for me because there's only so many times I can hear about about the team. What is it called? The quaffle changing possessions. Like it's too much. There's not enough variety in the announcer. As good as they are, once you play the game long enough, like I have, it's just too repetitive. Speaking of being repetitive, we're moving on here. So controls, and we'll talk about push to talk here in a second. I set this to default, and it set it to sharpshooter. Oops, sharpshooter is not for me. I do not like to fly forward by holding the left stick up. If that is you, I'm going to be changing a couple of the key bindings here, and I'll give you some reasons behind it. But you're going to need to interpolate for yourself if you want to make a similar change and what button makes the most sense for you. So we're going to switch to Broom Racer because this is how I play, and this is the best way that I can explain some of the whys behind some of these changes here, which is to fly forward and fly backward using R2 and R1. All right, so let's go back up to the top here. Right off the bat, we've got sensitivity. I know that there is a large opinion of folks that like sensitivity up to 100 or 80 or somewhere in that range. It's not for me because, and this is probably true also for the people who like it really high. I like to use square for drifting, and for me, the camera is just a little bit too erratic. So I bumped this down to 20, and I'm not using this as a recommendation, but what I am explaining here is that there are two sliders and one variable to consider. The variable is how often do you like to use drift? And depending on that, you might decide to really bump this up to 100 or tone it back down, depending. And the other slider is in gameplay, and it's the vertical camera tilt. This adjusts how much the camera will tilt with the broom's movements, specifically the vertical axis. Um, I would recommend that you get into a practice session as the seeker and fine tune these two sliders to your liking because these are global settings that apply to all roles, and sometimes it can be pretty jarring to have a configuration that you like for the beater, definitely for the keeper, and then switch to a seeker and it feel hypersensitive. And that was me in my case. So for me, I'm okay with having this low, with this at about where it was before. I even toned this down still because of my play style. I don't often play as chaser, and maybe that will be a reason why you would want to have it higher. I do like to play as keeper, which again might be a reason why I like these lower. So consider your role, and I would say play with these two sliders in addition to thinking about how much you use drifting, and find those fine tune those as you're practicing with Seeker, and then you'll easily get used to the rest of these configurations for any of the other roles that you play. All right. For focus cam, I do want to press triangle here in order to toggle this to a toggle instead of a hold, but I do like to leave the rear cam as a hold because I only want to quickly look at it and I don't want to have to be pressing buttons multiple times because it's usually in the moment and pretty quick that I want to get in and out of rear cam. But focus cam, sometimes it's fine to just toggle it and then keep your right stick going. So we're going to change this keybind in a minute here, but for now, actually let's just change it now. I'm going to be using triangle for something else. So I want this is my recommendation for my playstyle, but I'll make a case for why I like these configurations, and you might want to try it out for yourself. So for focus cam, I actually want this to be the right stick, R3, and for rear cam, I want this to be L3. So now all of my camera adjustments are going to be done with my sticks. No buttons are involved. And so I can quickly toggle in and out of focus cam while still being able to move and look. And similar for rear cam, usually I'm not moving around with my left stick that much when I want to use the rear cam. So that's how that works. Now for camera zoom, I'm going to bind this to the down D-pad. We'll talk about how that changes here in a moment. But I do want this as toggle as well. So let's just jump down a little bit and kind of explain the D-pad a little bit. And then we will give you a demo of camera zoom in action, so you'll get to see what that does, because I think it's very easy to miss the benefit of this binding. So for flying, just know that if you do switch one of these to toggle, you're switching both of them to toggle. I don't really know if that's by intention or not, or if that gets fixed later. But for now, that's a big decision. I'm going to eventually move to toggle, but I'm not there yet. But I do toggle boost. I don't want to be holding both R2 and L2 at the same time. I'd rather let off of R2 and then get back onto R2 and then toggle the boost. Drifting is fine as square, dodging is fine as circle, primary action is fine as X. Just know that you cannot switch, throw, and kick to be two separate buttons. So I could reassign primary action as circle, but then all these three actions are tied to circle. That's what that means. And if you don't want to charge, if you just don't want to deal at all with charging, the throwing, or the kicking, then you can switch these to toggle. Now, as far as secondary actions, we are not going to keep this as L1, and here's the reason. When I'm playing the game, I do get a little bit of fatigue in my fingers, specifically on my left hand. So if I'm holding L2 or even toggling L2 with boost, I really don't want to be messing with both my index finger and my middle finger. I'd rather just have my index finger working the same way as my right hand does when I'm going forward or backward. I'm just using my index to pick one of the two buttons. So to make that easier, one thing I don't want to be doing is spamming L1 with my index finger. It just kind of fatigues me out as I'm holding the controller. I admit I'm a little weird about this, so this may not apply to you at all. But I do like having the secondary action be mapped to one of my buttons, and that button is triangle, if it lets me. There it goes. So I don't want any of these to be toggle, although I don't really know what the difference is. Maybe the pass is a hold, but I believe all the other ones are just presses anyways. So I don't really know what the difference is with toggling versus holding here, but I do know that I like being able to keep using my thumb on a face button for these. Now, even though before L1 was mapped to secondary action and call for pass, you've noticed L1 remains for call for pass. I'm good with this. When I'm playing, I've got my index finger on my left hand toggling boost on, and usually I'll have it on or off when I call for pass, depending on my position. And I don't often you're only calling a call for pass when you're playing the chaser anyways, and I don't often play as the chaser, so this is good for me. So that's the secondary action map to triangle, so that all of my actions are on my face buttons, and I've gotten used to that, and it's been working out pretty well for me. Now, as far as strafe sensitivity, these settings are only exclusive to the keeper. It's 85, bump it to 100. You're not going to notice a difference, and if you do, it's for the better. You're going to need to. You're already kind of twitchy enough as it is as the keeper, so you don't need anything slowing you down on that reaction time. Everything else, it's totally fine. We'll leave it the same. Now, if you notice for menus, we got rid of the down arrow for the position swap. For me, the way that my brain works, I never really resonated with the up-down for position changes. It was always left-right for me. So I've already been mapping the quick position to the left and I went the wrong way with that. Quick position to the left and position, like the hard position to the right, which it doesn't want me to do anymore, and I don't know why. It's like not registering it. That's so weird. How weird. It's like not letting me. There's the right one. How is it like broken? Wow, I'm hitting right on the D-pad and nothing is happening. This is so bizarre. There we go. I had no problems changing this before. There we go. That one went. There we go. I got him to do a reverse flip. Whatever. Really bizarre. I've never had that problem before. Anyways, quick position to the left, just so it's I don't accidentally slip off the left stick, and then suddenly, in a jarring way, I've switched positions. So I like having it on the left. And then if I do happen to accidentally bump the right D-pad on the position wheel swap, I don't mind the menu being up on the display. I can ignore it, and it goes away on its own after a few seconds. For the emote wheel and the social comms, I don't really need either of these. I don't often emote, and I really don't ever use the social comms. So I wanted to free up these two buttons. Now, as you saw earlier, in fact, I just kind of unbroke or messed that up. I want my camera zoom to be the down D-pad. And so what that does is it frees up my up on the D-pad. And up on the D-pad is a really good button for push to talk. So that's what I've done here. So you notice in the audio, I turned on voice chat and I turned on push to talk, which means I have to press the button and hold the button in order for my microphone to be active for other players to hear. Here, I've mapped that to a button, which is the up arrow. So only when I'm holding the up arrow will they hear me. That's great. I can hear them and I can choose when to be heard. And I'm probably over explaining that for people who are familiar with push to talk, but not everybody is. All right, so I don't need those. And now I've got camera zoom and push to talk enabled. And by the way, I don't know if you knew this or not, but if you hold the touchpad, it actually brings up a text box and you can type in any message you want that'll appear as chat. But there is I'll show it to you, but there's a warning that just says, hey, just FYI, we record all the messages, so don't provide anything personal, hate speech, all that kind of stuff. Be responsible with the chat box, but it's there if you need it. And lastly, this is a personal preference, but I like to bump this down to 20 because the vibration is triggered every time you're on boost. And if you're playing as Seeker, you're pretty much on boost 100% of the time. And I don't need that eating away at my battery on my controller, so I just bump this down. Again, preference for that one, but the other ones I think are really solid recommendations with your D-pad and any other buttons, remappings. Now, as far as gameplay goes, we don't change a lot here. For me, I told you about my vertical camera tilt being 15. I'll show you a few of these in actions, but basically the game feed, I'll show you that one in action. Input reminders is just letting you know, it says how to show the move reminders on the bottom right while playing. This is just showing you telling you what the buttons do. So once you're familiar with all the buttons, you can turn this off and free up some real estate on your screen. Same thing with the charge indicator. Once you get a feel for how long it takes to charge, either a kick or a throw, you can probably ditch this too, but that's totally up to you. However, I will say it's better to turn off character names. This is not a factor when you're playing offline in any of the cups. This is only when you're playing in multiplayer. And in multiplayer, I'm not going to show it to you, but basically in multiplayer, next to the icon of every player on the field, it shows the username or the player ID name. And that can really muddy up the screen if you've got a couple of players playing close to each other and you're not sure which one you're targeting or which one is which between the seeker and maybe a chaser because the name of the character is in the way. So I always just turn that off. I don't really need to know who's who on the field. Maybe that'll be more important if I were to get super competitive. But for now, uh, I just turn it off. And you don't really need display net info unless you're really concerned about, your FPS and stuff like that. But usually it's good for a quick check and then you turn it back off. Now we did talk a little bit about the audio. I turned off game music and I did all this other stuff. I did mention the announcer volume being shut down real low for repeatability. And I make up for that with the subtitles. So I turned it down to small and I set the background transparency to 80. 80 makes it so that I can just barely see the background, but it's super transparent enough where it's on a wall of black on my screen. And that's really good. And it makes up for the, change possessions and stuff like that. I usually only ever want it as a helpful reminder in certain situations about the snitch or something like that. Everything else is pretty straightforward here. This is, if you need text to speech, you know what this is. I will come back to color vision mode because I do have a recommendation here, as well as outline thickness. I'm going to show you that in game. Crossplay, leave that on. Clench protection is if you're the type of player that accidentally in pressure cooker situations you tend to squeeze the remote a lot. Considering that I just changed two button bindings to R3 and L3, you might need to turn this on if you find yourself triggering the wrong controls at the wrong time. That might be something to play with. But if you're not that person, then just move on. And then lastly, for the text that appears on the top left, when people do leave messages, I turn that to small. And again, the same thing with the transparency. There is not an option right now to turn all that off. So you will see it. And actually, I think you can do this too if you don't want to see any of that stuff. But there's that. All right, so let's get into a game, and I'll show you some of these settings in action here. I did not. I can't tell you how many times I accidentally go into open practice. Actually, this is not too bad. Let's change position to the. Can I change to the seeker? I can't change to the seeker. Why can't I change to the seeker? Okay. Sorry. That's not what I wanted to do at all. You did notice probably the sounds were pretty strong. Let's do this. Continue. I'm going to show you this on this map specifically because it's a blend between the darks and the lights. There's a very contrasting appearance between these two when it comes to the color schemes. This is kind of a happy medium, but I'll show you that too. I haven't gone to be too extreme where I change color schemes based off of the map yet, but you can hear my volume compared to the game volume. The crowd is really loud, and even at 15, I can still hear the announcer well enough. But I do want to pause here because up on the top right is where the game feed box comes into play. Right now it's on. If I turn it off, you'll notice in the background on the top right corner, they go away. It just tells you basic highlights of what's going on in the game. These are so non-invasive into the UI that I always just leave them on. And that's that one. So let's get back into the game here. Actually, let me turn down the audio just for the sake of this rest of this video, because I think you did hear the quality of the announcer at that low volume. And I don't want to be yelling. Okay, so right now with the color scheme, I want to point out a couple things. Just again as possible hints, maybe you know this stuff already. Outline thickness. This is the outline that appears around the player to help you distinguish who's on your team and who's not on your team. I have heard of people mentioning that when the opponent is dressed in blue, it sometimes can be confusing that they're on your team because your team's always blue. If you increase this thickness, it is no, you're never going to have that problem. So let me show you what this looks like at its lowest settings when it's still set to 1. And we're going to switch to the keeper. So you can see in the far range, I can still see the icons, but I can't see the keeper. I can see the keeper's icon, but I can't see the keeper, right? So sometimes that can be helpful if you don't want to see as much of the players and you just want to see the icons. That can be helpful. Obviously, that's at depth. But and this is how I like to play this at 3, full max, and I'll show you the difference here. This is a very slow slider, as you can see. There we go. Now when I turn this on, you can see the goalie, right? I can see where the goalie's going low. I can see everyone in those little blips. And as they get closer, it becomes very obvious, who is on my team and who isn't. I don't have to worry about what they're wearing or anything like that. I tried kicking that person, but it didn't work. So that's what that does. Oh, I got eliminated too. That's crazy. So let's switch to the beater here, and I'll show you something else here. Remember we changed the binding on the D-pad down to camera zoom? This is what that does. Bloop. How nice is this? Like, this is a no-brainer. You need to have this button available to you so that you can just expand. Like, this is what I'm seeing normally. Now I've expanded it out. I can see so much more of the field. I don't know why I would ever not play with this. However, you do need to know that when you change positions, you can see it actually already switched back to keeper. It reduced the camera back, even if I didn't change my position. It'll do the same thing if I'm switching to a chaser. I press down, I can see more of the play area, and then I switch to keeper, and I'm back to the regular camera, but I can still expand that out if I want to. So getting a binding for camera zoom, man, that's going to be such a light and day difference. You're always going to play with it, basically. All right, that's that. I talked about almost everything except for the last thing, which is the color vision mode. I'm not colorblind, but I do like to change these settings. So I will tell you what they do. First off, like you're probably already aware, the going from left to right, the blue and the red represents the players. Your team is blue, the opponent team is red. The two yellows, the first one represents the bottom left bar that shows you all of the icons on your team, and then the second yellow one represents the modal of, or within the modal of the Seeker, your progress bar will be yellow. So let's show you what that looks like, because we're just about to get the Seeker. I'll just let this run out. Um, oh, I should have timed that a little bit better, shouldn't I have? Come on, come on. Beater's just about to come out, or the Seeker's just about to come out. All right, there it is. So the snitch is out, Seeker's out, and we're gonna find that snitch. I'm toggling. Oh, there it is in front of me. All right, so I got the snitch here. Now you see the progress bar. It's the bottom ring, the bottom like a U-shaped ring around the circle for the snitch. It's filling up yellow. That's my bar. Just above that yellow bar is the enemy team, opposing team's bar, and it's white. It's really hard to see, but this gives you enough of the information so that you don't have to constantly be looking at the scoreboard. So that's what that other color of yellow does in accessibility. So if I change this, and by the way, the green and the red on the far right side of this, these are always going to be green and red. You can't change that. The green is going to represent, I believe, your health bar, and the red's going to be those little warning pop-ups when the bludger's coming your way, and the arrows that are surrounding your player with where the enemy positions are and stuff like that. That's always going to be the same. So here, if I switch this one to Deuteranopia, um, you'll see here that my team colors are now blue. The opposing team is orange, and where's my snitch ring? Oh, here it is. The progress bar on the snitch is now magenta. That's a lot easier to see. I wish I didn't get killed just now, but that's a lot easier to see. The progress on that. And I don't exactly remember where the cyan comes into play. I don't remember where that one is. I think it's the cyan is what I think it switches to when you are able to grab the stitch itself. And so one thing I did notice that was a little bit finicky or tricky was that sometimes the players will switch to fuchsia, and sometimes that threw me off. And it's going to be the case no matter what color scheme you pick. But with the orange ring going around the quaffle, or as a keeper, the orange ring or the orange line that represents the trajectory for the player as they're about to shoot, that kind of conflicts with the color scheme of the player itself. So I didn't stay on this color scheme for too long, but I did appreciate its differences. It makes it easier for me to see the players on the field, especially at distance. This other one I want to show you, and this isn't I don't prefer this one, but I'm going to make a case for why you might like this one. So for Protanopia, this would be helpful if you're more concerned about your teammates' positioning, because I think the purple is easier to see than the yellow being the opponent team. So if I change to beater, I can see the yellow, the rings are yellow, I know what I'm doing with the yellow. For me, it feels like the purple pops out more than the yellow, so I can pay attention to, kind of what's going on that way. I do like that, and also, if you'll notice the bottom left of the icons for your team is now that dark blue color, which is right there in that spectrum. The lighter shade of blue is what the Seeker progress will switch to. So it switches from, crap, I got hit. Switches from that dark blue into a lighter blue. And with the blue here, you can definitely see the opposing team's progress much simpler than you could with the yellow. Now they're about halfway through. I don't even have to look at the scoreboard. I know that they're halfway through and growing. So that's helpful. And I don't mind that one. But for me and my playstyle, I don't really want to see my team easier than the opponent team. And that's why I love this one. This one is, it's still going to have the yellow around the ring here, but you'll notice that when it switches to me being able to grab it, it's now bright green. And that is like, green means go. I know I'm going to cut it off. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see that I did that thing that's green. Like, this is very obvious. Okay, I'm ready to catch you. So I'm going to cut them off, and got it. With the green and the red, I'm going to switch to the keeper. You're going to also be able to easily see the opposing team. I think that just pops more from the background of the environments simpler. So that's what I would recommend for many players, is to use this color scheme. And the yellow for everything else, like the highlights on the top right and the icons in the bottom left, it just makes it really simple to see. So that would be my recommendation for y'all is to play with these color schemes and see if it works for you, even if you're not colorblind. With the thickness in this, I think that'll upscale your game a little bit by just making it simpler to gather the information on the field. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to show y'all with these settings. Hopefully that you get something good out of it. I'm just going to touch real quick on these menus and make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, I do want to show you this. So if I press and hold the touchpad, anytime now, there it is. I can now type whatever I want to the team. And that's how you can do that in the PlayStation. But again, if you'll notice, there's a message that appears as soon as I open the box. Well, let's wait for it to go away. It's kind of bugging out right now. I'm not really sure why. It wasn't bugging out earlier. Let's see if that... Okay, now I want to try it again. There is messaging that does appear underneath the box, and it's just to remind you that you need to be responsible with what you say here. But if you did need a way to quickly message your team a bit more specifically, that would be the way to do it. And that's it. You can see the transparency works pretty good with the announcer, and even with my volume set to low, you can still hear the announcer. And yeah, I hope that these control bindings are beneficial for you. And yeah, all the good stuff that comes along with it. So thanks for watching, and I hope that, oh, by the way, if you have a recommendation for maybe an alternate control scheme or an alternate setting that maybe I missed or didn't cover well enough, I would encourage you to put it into the comments so that future viewers have a chance of seeing an alternate perspective. I think that more information will help the player base that much more, so that it's much appreciated. And so now with that, I will say thanks for watching, and yeah, we'll catch you next time. Bye.